Hi, this is Marisa Portuondo, and this is the 9th video in our litigation series, and I'm going to talk about trial. Now, I don't want to give the impression that there aren't other aspects of litigation, that we've covered every single thing in these videos. There are things that we haven't discussed, such as subpoenas and, motion practice. There's just so many things that can happen in litigation. It would probably take a whole month's worth of videos to cover everything, but I did want to cover the basics and what happens in the majority of cases. Now, at least in my experience, I have found that fewer cases are going to trial. I think people are starting to realize that going to trial is extremely expensive, it's extremely risky, and a lot of cases are getting settled prior to or sometimes even during a trial. So believe it or not, we have cases that have settled, the night before trial, after everyone has prepared and spent days and all the stress and all the worry and all the prep work and printing out all the exhibits, and then the case gets settled. But sometimes, it's inevitable and you do end up in trial. So I think trial is probably the part of litigation that most people understand, and that's because so many movies feature a trial. But, real brief, we'll just talk about what happens at a trial. And I want you to understand a trial can be extremely simple, just a couple of hours long, or it can be extremely complex and last, days, sometimes even weeks. As you know, at least as you see in most movies, you see what's called a jury trial. But there are also other types of trials called bench trials, and that is where only the judge is present. Now, what a lot of people don't understand is that in a jury trial, you have the jury responsible for determining what are the facts. And what does that mean? They are the trier of fact. So it's up to the jury to decide, who do we believe, right? Who's telling the truth? And then it's up to the judge to apply the law. And those are two very different roles. In a bench trial, the judge does both things. There are instances where you might prefer a judge and other instances where you might prefer a jury trial. It's very common that if you are the plaintiff and you are looking for, a lot of money and it's against a company that, maybe a jury would sympathize with you, that company is the big bad company and they did this big bad horrible thing, you might want to be in front of a jury because the jury might be more willing to give you more money. There's other cases where, maybe the issue is super complex and you really want to go up in front of a judge because, the judge might have a better understanding of the really complex legal issues that might get lost on a jury that isn't, trained in the legal system. So really, there's just so many things to take into consideration when deciding which kind of trial you want. But if you do want a jury trial, you do have to ask for it, or else you waive that. And you do have to ask for that early on in litigation. So what happens in the trial, either way, whether it's a bench trial or a jury trial, you have your opening statements where both sides get up and they kind of give their speech and, introduce themselves to the jury or the judge and give their theory of the case. You then have witnesses that are called. Of course, there's, just like you see in the movies, objections and arguments and all kinds of things that happen. And then you finally have the decision that's rendered in the end, whether that's through the jury or through the judge. Now, remember we are talking about civil litigation here, so we're not talking about anyone getting hauled away to jail or anything like that. But, oftentimes in civil litigation, one of the parties does not agree with the outcome. And when that happens, there can be an appeal. And I don't think I'm even going to film another video about that, but basically an appeal is almost, you're going up in front of the court all over again, and you're kind of arguing specific points where you feel like you didn't get a fair shot at trial. So I hope that this series has been helpful. I know our videos got a little bit complex. I tried to really, kind of make it as simple as possible and explain things because I know how scary litigation is. I know how complicated it is. I know all the legal, words and jargon and everything gets really overwhelming for people who aren't trained. And I know that as attorneys, we sometimes take it for granted that people know what we're talking about. So if I did get a little bit too technical, I apologize, but it is a complex issue. Now, as always, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask in the comments, or you can always email me. Alrighty, well, I hope you've enjoyed that series and that this has brought a little bit of clarity and hopefully a little bit of stress reduction to you if you are involved in litigation or considering litigation. Take care.